A federal civil rights investigation now underway into those deadly events in Charlottesville, Virginia, where that car plowed into the crowd. 20-year-old James Fields from Ohio. He was arrested after the crash and now charged with second-degree murder, but that could just be the beginning. Let's bring in our legal panel. David Schwartz, a defense attorney and former prosecutor, and Wendy Patrick is a veteran prosecutor and trial attorney. Thank you both for talking to me. You know, we've just learned through a Department of Justice official familiar with the Charlottesville investigation, telling Fox News apparently the DOJ has actually opened a federal civil rights hate crime investigation, saying, and I'm quoting, "The Civil Rights Division's criminal section works with its partners in the United States Attorney's offices and the FBI to enforce federal criminal civil rights statutes, including hate crime statuses, one or more of which may be implicated by yesterday's tragic attack." Wendy, do you foresee federal hate charges coming? And then how difficult would that be to prove a hate crime in this case in particular?
Two very good questions, Julie. And first, our hearts and prayers go out to the victims, their families, in that community. Such a terrible time. But when it comes to hate crime, that's a bit of a misnomer, because prosecutors don't need to prove hate. All they need to prove is that a victim was selected based, and listen to the way it's phrased, on his or her membership, actual or perceived, in a protected category. That can be race, nationality, religion, sexual orientation, what have you. Counter-protesters are not a protected group. So you have to think there's got to be the kind of background circumstances you would need in order to find it awful. It's going to be awfully difficult to prove a hate crime. However, now that you heard a federal investigation has been undertaken, that kind of circumstantial evidence that we're no doubt going to find in terms of that investigation, that can then be used for a state hate crime investigation and also potentially for domestic terrorism. So you can go from there.
Okay. So, David, domestic terrorism is actually one of the things that the feds are looking into. They're also looking to whether or not Fields had helped planning the attack. Okay, so witnesses from our reporters on the ground had said that basically they overheard white supremacists shouting to the driver of the vehicle which direction to drive the car, yelling something like, this way, that way. So there seems to be a good chance this guy didn't act alone. So what charges could those who helped plan or carry out this attack face?
Well, I mean, certainly Fields, he's facing the murder charges right now. And look, you're going to have to look at all the evidence. You're going to have to investigate this case to figure out if there are any other charges. Now, as to the bystanders, well, they're not such bystanders, if they could be co-conspirators. And there's a very fine line between just being a bystander and a co-conspirator. If you're 1% involved in this attack, just 1%, you could be charged for the crimes, the same exact crimes that Fields is being charged with.
Second-degree murder.
Absolutely a second-degree murder, and the domestic terrorism charges and any other civil rights charges as well.
Wendy, do you think a second-degree murder charge is strong enough? I mean, if it is proven that this was indeed intentional, and this guy planned all of this and he wanted to kill somebody, I mean, they should throw the book at this guy. What he committed is domestic terrorism, and the charges facing him should serve as an example that this type of behavior will not be tolerated in this country. Second-degree murder charge?
Amen.
I mean, is that tough enough, really?
That's right. Well, amen, Julie, first of all, to everything you just said. The reason it's second-degree murder is right now you've got a level of recklessness that resulted in a death. Once the investigation is complete, once they're able to find the surrounding circumstances, whether it's planning, whether it's the, more evidence of a motive, remember we're looking at social media, the bystanders, whether it's going to be a conspiracy, you can bet that the prosecutors are going to take that extra information and elevate the charge to whatever they see. They're also looking at whether it is identity or identity plus ideology. In other words, were those victims targeted because of their membership in a protected class? And the larger question of, are we looking at a greater ideology? And remember that there's no double jeopardy proceeding both statewide and federally. So like the Dylan Roof case, if you remember that, in Charleston, it actually could end up being both jurisdictions pursuing the same or similar charges. No problem with that at all.
David, real quick.
Also, let me just add depraved indifference for human life. So even though they may not be able to prove that he intended to kill any one person, when you act
what do you expect when you drive a car 40 miles per hour
Julie,
through a crowd?
let me finish my point.
I'm just saying. His defense is going to have a hard time.
When you have I'm making your point.
Yeah.
When you have a depraved indifference for human life, that's another theory of murder, even though you may not have intended to kill a particular person.
Right.
When you act with such depravity, you could also be charged with murder.
No, great point. David Schwartz, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wendy Patrick, thank you. And I didn't think that you were arguing my point. I was just saying.
No,
I
was making your point.
I'm with you, 100%, both of you. Thank you both.